Welcome back to College Football Addiction, the Orange Bowl tonight, Penn State, Notre Dame, the game that, honestly, I might be more excited about. That's no shot at Texas or Ohio State. I'm excited to see if Texas can figure something out to slow down the Buckeyes. But, man, when you talk about a game that should live up to every single bit of hype, a game that is down in sunny South Florida, a game that you have two styles that are very, very similar, it is about as exciting as it can get. That said, I don't think there's going to be a lot of points scored here. So I'll tell you very first and foremost, I love the under in this game. Now, that probably means that we're going to get a final score that's like 27-24, and it'll just barely glide over, and you guys will all come to me and say, hey, how did this happen? But I'm telling you, I like the under in this one. I think that both teams play this pretty clean. That'll be one of the things I talk about here in just a moment. But I think we're going to be in store for an absolute classic. Now, some of you may be asking, hey, TJ, you said you were going to be down there in Miami. Why are you doing this from the studio? Why are you doing this from where we see you from all the time? Well, that unfortunately did not end up happening. I tested positive yesterday for flu type A. I feel like absolute crap and could not, in good conscience, ride in a car down to Miami with my buddy for 4+ hours, then be in an Airbnb with him for several hours, then be next to him this close at the game for however many hours, and then obviously drive back home with him for another 4 hours in the car, giving him the flu too. Let's just be very honest. And so I don't feel good. I would have toughed it out if it was just me myself. I couldn't get him sick by being selfish. So I'm sitting at home and watching it on TV. I wish I was there. I'm incredibly bitter. I'm incredibly salty. I'm incredibly jealous. The only thing saltier maybe is the chicken noodle soup that my wife just made me. But I wish I was down there. And if you're down there watching the game, hopefully you do have a great time. You'd certainly rather be in Miami right now than in Dallas. Penn State Notre Dame, some questions that I have about this game and what I think it really comes down to. And I'll make a prediction here in just a minute, but I'll tell you, I think my prediction's worth about as much as an empty water bottle. Like, it absolutely means nothing just because I don't have any clue how this thing ends up going down or who ends up coming out on top. But for me, Drew Allar almost has to up his game some. Now, I don't think he's been bad in the playoffs, but I do think that he's certainly been a little bit below where he wants to be. Every single regular season game this year, he had a 60+% completion percent all season. His last 3 games, though, in the 50s. 51.3 against Oregon, 59.1, so just a shade under against SMU, and then 52% against Boise State. So there has been a slight drop-off. Now, there's been a raise in competition. He played 3 playoff teams in a row. I get it. But I do think that needs to tick up just a little bit. He needs to get back up into the 60s. Obviously, he had the 3 touchdowns against Boise State. When he's on, he looks phenomenal. He's throwing dimes. No turnovers through the air since that Big Ten championship game. He did have the 1 fumble against Boise State, but I do think he is protecting the ball. He's taking care of the ball better since that Oregon game. But I do think the percentage, the completion percentage needs to tick up a little bit over 60. If he throws in the 50s, I think that's probably advantage Notre Dame. I think Riley Leonard can match him if that's the case. And I think for Penn State to win, he needs to be slightly better than Riley Leonard through the air, which I think he has every capability of being. Riley Leonard can obviously kill you with his legs and still a good passer, but I think Allar has that tick higher that he can go. But he has to show that, right? I don't think he can be in the mid-50s, low 50s like he has been a couple of times here in these last 3 games. How effective will the Penn State rushing attack be against that Notre Dame front? We know that Mills is out. We know that they've had some injuries. They've been banged up. I still really do like Notre Dame's front, but I do think if there's somewhere that Penn State can attack, it very well may be the middle of that defensive line. And if they can go straight at it, and if they can have some success with their very good offensive line, their very good rushing attack, that will open things up for Allar. I like Allen. I like Singleton. I think they provide a very dynamic, a very different attack when you've got both of them up and going. Both of them have had very good years, very good postseasons. If they're able to be effective against Notre Dame's front, then I think that's a big tick up for Notre Dame. Mention Leonard's legs. I've said this every time we've previewed it. I've said this with everybody that we've gotten on to kind of get their thoughts. But to me, the biggest thing that he does is his timely runs. He doesn't just fill up the stat sheet just unnecessarily. All of his runs seem to be incredibly important, and they all seem to be big-time plays in big-time moments. If Riley Leonard goes for over, I'm putting the line at 65. I don't even know what the Vegas line is. I don't really care. If Leonard goes over 65, so he's trending up towards that 70 number or even more, that would probably spell a Notre Dame win to me. It means that he's converting on some third and longs. He's making some second and longs into third and shorts to get them back, ahead of the sticks. I think that Riley Leonard's legs, if you could tell me what his stat line was going to be on the ground right now, I could probably tell you who has a pretty good chance of winning this game. Both these teams are incredibly opportunistic, and that's been the one thing that I've taken away from this playoffs. Talked about that with Joe. We talked about that with Tom Hannafin. I think that it's a big deal how both of these teams scores. Their offenses have not lit things up by any means, but they've taken advantage of opportunities when presented. You think about Penn State going back to that SMU game, scoring multiple times on turnovers, sometimes as a result of turnovers, sometimes directly on the turnovers with pick sixes. You think about what Notre Dame did against Georgia with the score to open the half, the kick return, and then right before that, the strip sack that turned into a touchdown on a very short field as well, and the fact that they scored 14 points in about a minute's worth of time. That is a big deal as well. And both these teams will kill you if you give them an opportunity. If you give them mistakes, if you give them turnovers, if you give them short fields, you give up a big special teams play. Obviously, Notre Dame tried to block the Georgia punt twice to open the game, and they were probably fortunate to just come away with running into the kickers, running into the punters. But both these teams like to get after it, and they like to make those big splash plays where they can. Both these teams are opportunistic, but I also think that both of these teams are extremely, extremely careful. Not to a point of being overly conservative, but to a point of we're not going to be the ones to make the critical mistake. SMU made the critical mistakes. Boise State made the critical mistakes. Indiana made the critical mistakes. And then obviously Georgia made the critical mistakes. Notre Dame, Penn State did not in either of their first two games each. Who makes that critical mistake here in this game? Obviously, there is no way to project that. There's no way to predict that. Is it more likely that one team does it than the other? I'd say just the way that Penn State plays, they're probably a little more likely to make that mistake. I think that Drew Allar is probably a little bit more loose with the ball than Riley Leonard is, just because they throw the ball more, because he takes more chances, because he trusts his arm, his receivers more. And I do like Notre Dame's ball hawking safeties that can go up and make plays. That's not to say that Penn State can't make plays. If you're asking me to predict who wins the turnover battle, I would probably lean Notre Dame, but honestly, by one turnover. It would not surprise me at all if this game ended clean with no turnovers, or if both teams had one. Or 1-0, right? So that's kind of how these aren't, if you'd asked me Penn State versus SMU, who turns the ball over more, SMU is going to turn the ball over more. They've been a turnover-heavy team all year. I don't think that it's quite the same with Notre Dame, Penn State. So I think Penn State's probably slightly more likely to turn the ball over than Notre Dame, but you're asking how to project that. The turnovers are largely luck and depend a lot on what else happens around you. The biggest thing that we haven't even mentioned yet is Abdul Carter's health. Obviously, it seems like the reporting is that he will go. If he doesn't, that's obviously a big deal. But like Tom said, is his being out there going to help Penn State? Is that going to be kind of a decoy? Is it a detriment? How does Abdul Carter impact the game? To me, that's the biggest question. If he was 100%, I'd probably be leaning Penn State in this one. I think that he is a big enough factor that it gives me some pause on who is able to step up behind him and who is able to step up and make the plays. Because Penn State has a lot of depth. There is not another Abdul Carter in college football. Let's just be very fair. So if he's effective, obviously massive check, massive swing back toward Penn State's way. But if I look at the things that I've thought of, right, like Allar's completion percentage, can he get that back up over 60? Who's more likely to commit a turnover? What are Leonard's legs look like? Who's more opportunistic? Who doesn't make that critical mistake? I think I've kind of joked about this. I've said it. I'll stick with the score. I think Notre Dame wins this, but I think it's incredibly close. I'll take the 21-20, the score that I've kind of thrown out a couple of times. And say that that's the way it goes down. There's probably no chance that that's how it goes down. It may even be a little lower scoring than that. Over under at 45. This may not even hit 40. But I'm leaning Notre Dame. I think they're probably the team that's a little less likely to make the massive mistake. I think that the Abdul Carter situation, just kind of the unknown there, is a question for me. And then do I think Riley Leonard outplays Drew Allar? Maybe just slightly. I do like Penn State's rushing game a little bit more. I like their offensive line a lot. I do think they have a lot of depth on that D-line. But, man, you could pick this game 10 times and probably be wrong 8 of the times just because I really have no clue how this one goes down. So, again, don't read too much into the prediction. I know Penn State fans will hate it that I picked Notre Dame, but I had to pick somebody. But, yeah, I don't know. The prediction is about as worthless as anything else. You just had to pick a team at the end of the day. I could see this game going either way. It's the kind of game that if it was played 10 times, nobody's winning more than 6, and it probably splits right down the middle at 5-5. Hopefully we get an absolute classic. That's the way it seems to be lining up, and this one seems like it could be a ton of fun. We will obviously recap it as soon as the game goes final. I'll come back here and eat all the crow if I'm wrong on who won. If not, I expect to see you guys. They're giving me a hard time in the comments right now. I expect to see you back here afterwards giving me my flowers or telling me how wrong I was. Either way, come back. We always like to have a good time. Let me know your thoughts. These are kind of my keys to the game. Do you have different ones? Are there different things that you think I forgot to mention? Again, it comes down to me in a close, very similar type matchup. It comes down to turnovers. It comes down to which quarterback plays a little bit better, and it comes down to who finishes drives a little bit better. I'm leaning Notre Dame there by a point, right? I have no confidence in this game. When I predict tomorrow's game, I feel pretty good about who I'm calling in that one. This one, I have no clue. I have no idea who's going to end up winning it. So I don't know. Don't give me too hard of a time for the prediction. So Notre Dame wins 21-20. We'll see afterwards tonight. Enjoy the Orange Bowl. Again, incredibly salty, incredibly annoyed that I'm not down there. But I'm on the mend. I'm on the recovery. So we'll talk to you guys soon here on College Football Addiction.